you are approaching this very empathetically as a leader, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur. You care, and you know that there are other leaders who care as well. There are other CEOs who care as well, but it's this perception gap, and you see that there are three reasons employees feel that you don't care as a leader about them because of a lack of understanding, a lack of demonstrated appreciation, and a lack of connection. And what you're talking about here really comes back to address these different points. How well do you know me? Which, if I think about the pyramid of human relationships that I teach, I ask leaders all the time, what's at the foundation of every positive human relationship? And they say trust. I say no, respect. Respect is at the foundation of every relationship. And it comes back to, once again, we got to respect ourselves before we can go and respect other people. I want to dive deeper into these points, this idea of lack of understanding. What are you seeing here?
I think one of the challenges with lack of understanding kind of speaks back to that issue of, in the same way that your employees, or in the same way that you might get frustrated that your employees, your team members, don't appreciate all the things you do for them, you probably don't appreciate all the things they do for you. I'm not saying that's because you're bad. I'm saying there's just a lack of understanding when we're interacting with another human being, regardless if that's a work setting or a personal setting, as to everything else that is going on in their life, everything that they've done, all the focus, the effort, the attention they're bringing, all the external forces that are impacting their ability to bring focus, attention, or care to the conversation. And I think when it comes specifically to the idea of understanding with team members, most employers hire on new team members and say, this is how our systems work. This is our processes. Follow this, do what you're told. And if you keep showing up and doing this in a good way repeatedly over time, you should get a promotion or a raise at some point in the future. And this is what we're paying you to do. That's great. But I'm reminded of the ancient parable where, to paraphrase here, I think it comes originally from Southeast Asia or Africa, where they're talking about a bunch of blind people describing an elephant, and like one is feeling the trunk and one is feeling the leg and one is hearing it, and all these different things where each of them thinks they have a clear understanding, but they only understand the one part they're touching. Your employees are the same way. Help them to understand how the business works. So many employees have no idea how their company makes money. That's one of the things that amazes me. I do team meetings and workshops, and I'll bring everybody together. And sometimes just for giggles, I'll say, how do we make money here? And I'll watch as there are dozens of different answers, most of which are completely inaccurate. And I'll watch CEOs and CFOs just cringe at the answers they're hearing. And I'm like, folks, the only cringing you should be doing is at your own onboarding and teaching processes, because if they don't clearly understand how the organization makes money, that's because we didn't teach them. We didn't show them. So there's a huge opportunity to increase the level of understanding, or as I like to think of it, hand-holding, when we have a new employee, to show them the ropes.
It's that we're speaking from an old world wisdom. There's some other wisdom here that comes to mind. Help me to understand, and as more so as much than to be understood, and help me to understand where you're at, which I also think connects to the next point here you make, a lack of demonstrated appreciation. And I think that's the key word. It's demonstrated. And you touched on this a little bit before. We might say a lot, but how are we actually showing that appreciation? Where may there be opportunities here to actually apply appreciation, not just through words, but also through action?
Well, what I think is often a fun place to start is for the leader, whether, again, you're a CEO or like a middle-level manager. I think everybody has the potential to be a leader in their organization, even if your business card or your signature line in your email doesn't exude leader-type position. One of the places where I've seen this show up a lot is as it relates to vacation. In the last few years, a number of organizations have gone to unlimited vacation, where they say to their people, as a benefit, you can have unlimited personal time off. What's been fascinating with most organizations that have rolled that out is they've actually seen employees not taking it. And they're like, wait a second, Joey, we gave them unlimited vacation. No one's going on vacation. I'm like, yeah, crazy the way that works. By the way, when's the last time you took a vacation? And they're like, well, I love my work. I don't need to take a vacation. I want my people to take a vacation so they don't get burnt out. I'm like, so let me get this right. You're the CEO who never takes a vacation, who's takes personal pride in being in the office before everyone else shows up and not leaving until everyone else is left. Do you realize how many of your people are looking at you and saying, well, if the boss doesn't take vacation, neither can I. If the boss is at work at 7 a.m., I better be there at 7 a.m. too. If the boss isn't leaving until 7 p.m. and I think I need to head out at 5 because that's technically my work day, boy, if I leave early, I might not get a promotion. I might not get a raise. So we have to lead by example to show them what we're doing. Number two, words are beautiful. Words are important. Telling your team how much you appreciate them is incredibly valuable. But what we know as human beings is our memory of words is not nearly as clear as we think it is. One need to only look to a conversation with a child. Hey, when we sit down at the dinner table, we put our napkins on our laps. How many times have parents had to teach a child that before they actually do it on their own? Or, with anyone else in a relationship, how many times do we have to say it before it really sinks in? I'm not opposed to saying it. I love the idea of saying it. I love even more the idea of memorializing it. What do I mean? Write it in a thank you note. Film it in a video. Leave it on a voicemail. Create some type of an artifact that stands as proof for your communicating your appreciation and their value.
That's a great point, is to document it, because how quickly we forget. I'll even get a little bit personal here. I think about my wife. She's like, it's been a while since we've gone out, done something. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We went out like 2 weeks ago, and we've done some things here and there. But the more that I've found that, back to your point about gratitude, the more if you journal through it, it cements it in the mind, and it's easier to recall. I also think this idea of appreciation, coming back to the point of vacation, and let's just call it time off for that matter. I'd love to get your take on this, because as I am coming back now from a 5-day weekend, as of recording, we had Labor Day, then we had the 2-day weekend before that, and then I took off Friday and then Thursday because I turned 42 on Thursday, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a much longer weekend. Every time I take an extended period of time, and I learned this from my time in strategic coach, you have free days. Free days are like, you don't think about work from 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. or midnight to midnight, however Dan Sullivan frames this. But
half days, right?
Right. Why are these free days or these free periods of time so important for us to consider, particularly in a world where our greatest asset is our mind? We're not necessarily working with our physical bodies. And if you go and you work out and you run a marathon, you have to recover. But we don't do that mindfully with our minds. Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons why we don't do that. Number one, we're not taught to do that. We have a lot of schools that take immense pride in sending kids home with 2 to 4 hours of homework. That's not convincing somebody to take time off, right? I mean, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, a mother who is basically on the verge of tears because her kindergartner, I want to make this clear, her kindergartner had 2 to 3 hours of homework every night. I'm sorry, at the risk of sounding horribly judgmental of that teacher or that school or whoever was behind the idea of giving that volume of homework to a 5-year-old, we can do better. We can do better as a species. Number two, I think we're in a scenario where the average person, I'm a geek when it comes to history. I love figuring out why do we do the things we do. This idea of a 40-hour work week, if you actually look where it came from, and by the way, most people are not working 40 hours. They're working many more than 40 hours. But let's just step back to this idea of 9 to 5. A lot of that came from the idea that that's when there was light. And when we were running factories, before we had electrification, we needed to be able to do our work in the light. That's why as you drive through most places that kind of have gone through the Industrial Revolution and have these old factories, you see these old factory buildings that are just huge amounts of windows. And my boys, we were driving by one not too long ago, and they were like, Daddy, look at that building with all the windows. It has so many more windows. And I'm like, guys, that's because when they first built that building, they didn't have lights. That's how the light came in. We now don't need light to work. The light emanating from our computers and our cell phones is giving us a tan. You know what I mean? We don't need that artificial light. So then we start to look at the hours we're working, this idea of 2 days off. If we go back a generation or 2 or 3 or 4, we start to think a little bit differently about seasons. I grew up in rural America in Iowa, and there's an interesting thing about farmers. Farmers, because of the nature of their jobs, have seasonal lives. And they have seasons where they do a lot of work in a short amount of time, i.e. planting. Oh my gosh, we've got 2 weeks to get all the crops in the ground. We're working from the time the sun comes up until night. And now that we have lights on planters, we're planting into the night. And we're doing everything we can. 7 days a week, boom, 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 go, go, go. But then kind of in the middle of the summer when the crops are growing, well, we're going out and checking the field and we're making sure everything's okay. And we're probably doing some other tasks, but there's not a lot of day-to-day activity that has to be done. Then we come to the harvest and we have this compressed time, go, 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 get it all harvest, get it in the wagons, get it to market as quickly as possible. Then we prepare the fields for winter, and then we have this quiet period, and winter is seen as recouping and thinking strategically about the next year and paying our bills from this year and doing maintenance on the machinery that we need for next year and all the things we couldn't get to in the time of go, go, go. The last thing I'll say on this is I think there is a marked difference between being physically exhausted and mentally exhausted. I've had the opportunity to be both. And in my estimation, mental exhaustion is exponentially more significant than physical exhaustion. And I don't think we are taking that into account in the way we treat our people, our teams, or ourselves.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And that really begs the question, what's the cost of all of this? What's the cost of losing an employee, particularly if we're not mindful, if we're not aware of how they are feeling, what their experience is like? Are they being mindful of themselves to take care of their physical well-being, their mental well-being, their emotional, their relational well-being, their spiritual well-being? All of these different elements are interconnected here that then creates value together as a team, and as a teams or teams coming together as an organization. But let's put some dollars and cents to this. Like, if we don't pay attention, if we're not aware, what's the cost of losing an employee?
Well, the costs are tremendous and fall into a variety of categories. So since you asked about specific dollars and cents, the financial impact, let's start there. Okay, in the United States, okay, looking only at the United States, annual turnover, i.e. loss of employees, is targeted at about $700 billion a year. That's the impact on businesses just on annual turnover. The cost of replacing a new employee, so a new employee joins, they leave, and we got to get a new employee into their seat. That replacement cost is somewhere between 100 and 300% of that employee's annual salary. Hey, this is not just, take care of your employees because you'll feel better about yourself. It's the right thing to do. Empathy, blah, blah, blah. No, this is bottom line impact on your business operation. Let's shift to another category from finance, health and wellness. Huge percentage of workers globally report incredible burnout. And the main reason they report burnout is because we're asking people to do more than we've ever done before with fewer elements of support. Everybody wants to be lean and, run with the least number of employees, but have the most number of clients and the biggest amount of impact. We're asking people to not buy into a 9-to-5 clock, but rather to chase the sun globally and be available 24/7, 365. We have a huge amount of mental load that is leading to a huge amount of emotional load that is leading to a huge amount of burnout. Now let's take it to the category of things for which there is no return. Heart attacks, divorce, death, lifelong implications for not paying attention to our well-being. whether that's our financial well-being, our emotional well-being, our spiritual well-being, our mental well-being, if we don't pay attention and focus on those things, the freight train of consequence starts to run into things that you really struggle to unwind. I mean, why is it that we have 20 and 30-year-olds having heart attacks? I mean, a piece of that is diet, a piece of that is a sedentary lifestyle, but I would posit a bigger piece of it is complete emotional and mental overwhelm. Why do we have more divorce than at any other time in human history? I would posit it's because everybody's working on everything but their relationships. And I get that's hard. And I don't say that from a place of judgment. I've been happily married for 13 years. But to your point, I carve out time in my calendar to make sure, and I don't always succeed at this, but I never want my wife to feel like, when's the last time we went on a date? When's the last time he brought me flowers? If somebody asks her those questions, I want her to be immediately able to remember the last time there was a thoughtful gesture, the last time there was quality time together. That's the most important relationship I have. Second is with my kids. Third is with my family and friends, which I include my team members in that. Then we get to my customers. And I'm a guy who wrote a book called Never Lose a Customer Again. I care about my customers, but I'm under no false illusion as to who I need to care about first to make sure I can care about my customers.
I had to learn from the school of hard knocks on this one. And I've talked about this on the podcast that in 2012, my wife came to me and shared that she needed me to make a choice. It was the family or it was the business. And I needed to get my life in order because I was completely out of balance. I was putting everyone else first. I was not even in the equation for myself personally. And I think that was the thing. And it was almost like I reached the downfall, the dark night of the soul, through that experience. So it's one that you're talking about. I've lived that. And we were able to work through that together, and we went from 2 kids to 4 kids. We had a multiplier on that.